What if an old World War II map incinerated in your hands, only to reappear in your vision as a 3D hologram pointing out buried treasures with flashing arrows? Would you go and dig? On the outskirts of Smolensk, a half-new UA's E-450 van. Its 4 doors wide open, sat parked in a forest clearing. A fine drizzle tried in vain to wash away the thick mud caking its body. Not far from the van, under the center of a thick canvas awning, Mason squatted in a 2-meter square deep pit, carefully clearing away the damp black soil. The Soviet-made entrenching tool struck the wet earth with a dull thud. "I found it." Mason's face lit up. He quickly tossed the shovel aside and began digging at the mud with his bare hands. A faint, putrid smell hit him as a charred log, hidden for over 70 years, saw the light of day once more. That's it, he thought. This is definitely the German frontline command post from the Second Battle of Smolensk. He had been at it for 2 full weeks, digging over a dozen sites. Around the Smolensk suburbs, he'd finally found it. With a heavy blow from the shovel, the long-rotted log was easily broken through. Mason quickly scooted back to widen the opening. Half a month, he muttered to himself, "Please let there be something good." Though he was mumbling, his movements became increasingly careful as he cleared the loose soil and the remaining sludge at the bottom. It took him a full half-hour to finally excavate a heavy metal box. The box was in excellent condition, but the lid was rusted shut to the body. Opening it would take some effort. He set it aside for now. Where are the weapons? He wondered how come there are no weapons. No bodies either. Mason pulled out a high-powered flashlight and continued to search. The cramped, damp underground space was filled with a thick, rotting stench. If his food and expenses for the next month didn't depend entirely on this haul, who would willingly suffer through this? After cursing Boss Key and his entire family once more, Mason, following some near-violent digging, finally spotted the outline of half a boot. She deep in the business for over half a year now. He could tell at a glance that it was a hobnail-eyed infantry boot, standard issue for the German army at the start of World War II. This was the right place. Without a word, he grabbed his entrenching tool and began digging along the boot. Gradually, the remains of a body lying face down at the bottom of the trench were revealed. Digging up a body that had been rotting for over 60 years in a dark, underground cavity was as terrifying as it sounds. But Mason was happy to do it. In a way, the smellier it was, the better preserved it was. And the better preserved the body, the more valuable it was. If he could even confirm the soldier's identity, he could hand over the remains to the German organization for searching for missing WW2 soldiers and get a thank-you payment of anywhere from $100 to $500. This particular skeleton was remarkably complete. It was just that the soldier's dog tag around its neck was severely corroded. He carefully collected everything into a large garbage bag, afraid of missing anything. He was especially careful around the hands. Finding a single SS ring would make him rich. A ring? That was pure fantasy. Mason knew better than anyone that the odds of digging up a ring were probably no better than digging up a tiger tank. However, although he didn't find a skull ring, he did discover a bracelet on the skeleton's wrist. What amazed him was that the bracelet was of a traditional Chinese design, gold minus inlaid jade with 2 dragons playing with a pearl. Under the light of his headlamp, 2 Chinese 5- clawed dragons, each as thick as a chopstick, one made of white mutton minus fat jade, and the other of gold, were intertwined to form a circle. Between their 2 heads, they held up a fiery red pearl slightly larger than a soybean. How strange, he thought. What's a Chinese artifact doing on a German evel? He decided not to worry about it for now. He rinsed the bracelet with some mineral water and slipped it onto his left wrist. How dirty could something buried for 60 or 70 years be? Besides, this thing was probably worth a lot of money. After collecting the few spoils from the body, Mason turned his attention to the metal box. Based on his professional experience, a rusted box wasn't a problem. As long as it hadn't rusted through, it probably had a better seal. With a couple of clangs from his shovel, a circle of red rust fell away. He expertly used the tip of the shovel to gently pry it open. With a crack, the box opened easily. Hey, there's a lot of stuff in here. Mason rubbed his hands together, muttering to himself as he started pulling things out. A leather bound diary, military maps, sheepskin gloves, a sweater, socks. Hey, there are even dust goggles. You are a fancy one, weren't you, my friend? All this stuff might just make you a lot more valuable. After taking out the miscellaneous items, the rest of the space was filled to the brim with books. He didn't expect this commander to be such a scholar. What he expected even less was that more than half of these books were traditional Chinese thread-bound books. Besides basic texts like the 3-character classic 100 family surnames and the Kangxi dictionary, there were even profound works like the I Ching and various Buddhist and Taoist scriptures. What was this guy into? Curious, Mason picked up one of the thread-bound books and opened it. The yellowed, mildew-spotted pages were filled with dense handwritten annotations in traditional Chinese characters. It was clear that the owner had studied them seriously. These ancient books were worthless in Russia, but if he could get them back to China, they would definitely be worth a lot of money. He happily took out seal bags and desiccant packs, carefully storing the ancient box one by one. The box was suddenly half-minus empty. Next, he put the former owner's clothes into a separate garbage bag with the skeletal remains. What was left in the box were treasures that could be immediately turned into cash. A bottle of an open vodka, probably captured from some battlefield. Old liquor like this might be worth a lot. He pocketed it. A few German 5- mark silver coins. These were extremely common and would only fetch enough for a few packs of cigarettes. The few 50- Pfennig nickel coins, however, were more valuable. The 50- Pfennig nickel coin was also known as the tank coin. In the later stages of the war, Germany was short on resources, and these nickel containing coins were all melted down to make tanks. As a result, not many survived. They were worth some money, but it was limited. A single coin might go for 10 or 20,000 rubles, which was about 1 or 2,000 yuan. The exact price depended on its condition. After clearing all this out, only a leather camera bag and a map storage tube remained in the box. Besides the bracelet already on his wrist, the camera was probably the most valuable item. If this thing still worked, it could sell for over 100,000, no problem. He carefully picked up the camera bag to examine it. The bag had 2 compartments, a large one for the camera and a smaller one containing bakelite film canisters. Perhaps thanks to German rigor, the lids of these 2 canisters were even sealed with paint. He had no idea if the film inside had been used, but now is not the time to open them. These 2 treasures had to be handled by a professional. If any photos could be developed, they would sell for a fortune. After properly storing the film, Mace finally took out the camera. It was a Leica. Even though he wasn't a camera expert, he recognized the Leica logo next to the swastika. His luck was unstoppable. Mason quickly put on a pair of white cotton work gloves and examined it carefully. Unfortunately, after being buried for more than half a century, although the camera was mostly intact, some key components were covered in rust. He could even see obvious condensation through the lens. This greatly reduced its value. But even so, this camera was still very likely one of the most valuable discoveries of this dig. He threw a few extra desiccant packs into the sealed bag with the camera. Still wanting more, Mason opened the map storage tube. He didn't even need to look to know what this was. It was definitely a military map used by German artillery during the Second Battle of Smolensk. Let's see how well it's preserved, he thought. Maps were very valuable, even less so than a newspaper from the same period. He casually opened the hard leather tube and tipped it over. A well-preserved map. Then the hardwood rod, slightly thicker than a cigarette, fell into his hand. But just as he was about to unroll the military map, the bracelet, which had been sitting loosely on his left wrist, suddenly tightened. The bead between the 2 dragon heads flashed with a fleeting red light. Before he could react, the military map in his hand incinerated under the red glow, turning to ash at a speed visible to the naked eye. Mason's right hand was still holding the map tube tilted, his left palm against the hardwood rod. His eyes went wide, his jaw dropping. A damp breeze blew past, scattering the ashes from his palm into the misty rain as if the map had never existed. Mace unstared blankly at his calm. He wasn't just shocked by the incinerated map. What terrified him to his core was that the very same map was now slowly unfolding in the vision of his left eye, just like a 3D holographic projection he'd once seen at a science museum. The holographic map occupied half of his vision, and for arrows of different colors even floated on it. Mason rubbed his eyes in disbelief. The map was still there, and it was getting clearer. He blinked again. It wasn't a hallucination. It definitely wasn't a hallucination, because whenever he focused his attention on any of the arrows on the map, it would clearly display its straight minus line distance from him. Mason suppressed the storm raging in his heart and tried to calm down. What just happened? Mason looked down at the bracelet on his wrist. It was now snug against his skin, the bead between the 2 dragon heads resting right on his pulse point. Did this bracelet burn the map and then project the map into his vision? What do the arrow markers mean? Can only I see this projection? Should I go check them out? More and more questions filled his mind. After a moment of thought, Mason decided to address the most important issue first. He turned on his phone's camera, set it up at an angle, and then stood in the frame, moving around 2 different positions. He played back the video. Good. It seemed only he could see this map. Does this mean this map will float in my vision forever? Although it didn't obstruct his view, he would definitely go insane in the long run. How do I turn off this map projection? As soon as the thought crossed his mind, the map in his left eye slowly rolled up into a tube to the left, emitting a faint glow. Open map. Mason focused his attention on the glow at the edge of his vision. Sure enough, the map unrolled again and the different colored arrows reappeared. Close it. Open it. He tried it over and over, a wide grin spreading across his face. This damn thing was an absolute treasure. After getting his fill of the novelty, his attention turned back to the different colored arrows on the map. There were a total of 4 arrows on the map, 3 green and 1 black. These arrows were scattered randomly across the map. The closest one to him was a green arrow, a mere 12.6 meters away, on the slope beside him. The farthest one was 9,413.2 meters away in a straight line. Should I go check it out? Fortune favors the bold. Without a moment's hesitation, Mason quickly walked towards the nearest green arrow. 5 meters, 2 meters, 0.71 meters. When his feet were directly on top of the green arrow, Mason found there was still a distance of 0.71 meters between them. Could it be underground? Mason felt his heart skip a beat. He grabbed his entrenching tool and started digging vigorously, following the arrow's guidance. The drizzling rain had been falling for a week. The soil on the hillside had absorbed enough water to become exceptionally soft, which made his digging much easier. It took him less than 10 minutes to dig a shallow pit half a meter square. In his left eye's vision, the distance between him and the arrow had shrunk to 0.1 meters. In other words, just 2 more shovel-LS would solve the mystery in his mind. He tossed the entrenching tool aside and lay on the edge of the muddy pit, using a small heart-shaped trowel in his right hand to scrape away the loose soil at the bottom. Scrape. The harsh sound of metal scraping against metal was enough to make one's teeth ache. Mason froze and lifted the trowel. With just one look, he could tell that a German M35 helmet from World War II was buried here. In the past, he would have been ecstatic to dig up a helmet that could potentially sell for as much as 50,000 rubles. But now, the joy of finding the helmet felt like an afterthought. This bracelet, could it be a sentient metal detector? If every arrow leads to an M35 helmet, and one helmet sells for at least 10,000 rubles, then for helmets would be 40,000 rubles, which is about 4,000 yuan. I'm rich. I'm rich. Mace unlifted his wrist and planted a firm kiss on the bracelet. With this bracelet, what treasure couldn't he find in the future? Lying on the edge of the pit, he took out a cigarette and took a long drag. The strong nicotine couldn't suppress his excitement. He flicked the cigarette, but away and picked up the trowel again. He gently pried along the edge of the helmet, and a helmet with a complete exterior finally left the mud that had been its companion for over half a century. At the same time, the green arrow representing the helmet in his map vision slowly dissipated into a wisp of smoke. Although the arrow had disappeared, the digging wasn't over. There was still a body under this helmet. He set the helmet aside and continued to expand the excavation area. Half an hour later, the full skeleton of a German soldier lying face down was revealed. After more than half a century, the clothes on the body had long since turned to dust along with the flesh and blood. Only the Mauser rifle in his hands vaguely retained its shape. There were still some gains. Besides the helmet he dug up first, the binocular case hanging from the body's waist was the most valuable item. The pitch-black bakelite case was still tightly secured by a clasp with an internal spring. He carefully opened the case. The BLC and A Tex 30 markings on the brass binoculars were clearly visible. He raised the binoculars to look at the road down the hill. Even after being buried for over half a century, he could still clearly see the colorful steel-styled roof at the foot of the hill. What about the other arrows? Mace unlowered the binoculars, his attention inevitably turning to the remaining arrows. The closest one now was a black arrow 248.1 meters away, also on the hillside. He could give that one a try. He quickly packed all the spoils, including the skeleton, into plastic boxes according to their importance. Then he backfilled the site, packed up his tent and miscellaneous digging tools, and started the van, heading straight for the destination over 200 meters away. I hope I can dig up some valuable treasures this time, and also find out what the different colored arrows mean. Rubbing his hands in excitement, Mason carried his entrenching tool to an oak tree as thick as a thermos. The position indicated by the black arrow was at the edge of the oak tree's roots, more than 2 meters deep. He didn't start digging right away. Instead, he surveyed his surroundings and fell into thought. A soil layer this thick couldn't have accumulated in just a few decades. The terrain here was flat with no possibility of landslides. Moreover, it was right next to the only oak tree in this birch forest. Could it have been intentionally buried? Having figured out the key point, a greedy smile appeared on Mason's face. Generally speaking, intentionally buried relics often contain valuable treasures. So, did the black arrow indicate high value? What's the point of thinking so much? I'll know once I dig it up. With the experience from last time, and since this one was buried more than 2 meters deep, he marked out a digging area 1 meter wide and 2 meters long. This would make digging easier, but it also increased the workload. He worked until it was almost dark, finally reducing the distance between himself and the treasure to 10 centimeters. Out of caution, he switched to the small trowel and slowly cleared the soil. After another half hour, a wooden box 20 centimeters high, 30 centimeters wide, and nearly a meter long was finally revealed. The box weighed at least 100 cat ties. The wood had long since rotted due to the soil's corrosion. It was obviously impossible to lift it out. Since he couldn't lift it, he might as well open it down here. It was a bit more trouble, but at least he wouldn't have to worry about damaging the treasures inside. Mace uneasily pried open the wooden slabs. To be honest, the Germans were meticulous in their work. The inside of the box was a sea of brown, filled with oil minus paper packages as expected, just as I thought. He randomly picked up an oil minus paper package and unwrapped it. It was a Volkspistol. The Volkspistol was a people's weapon, ordered by Hitler himself, when Germany was on the decline and facing defeat in World War II. Although it was a simplified version, this sheet minus metal pistol was very finely made. It hadn't trusted at all after being buried for so many years. Most importantly, even though this thing was a cost minus cutting product, its price was anything but low due to its extreme rarity. After stowing the Volkspistol, Mason pulled out another oil minus paper package. This time it was a revolver. Its condition was far worse than the previous one. Not only were the rifling grooves worn smooth, but the gun was also covered in rust spots. This broken gun was worthless. He tossed it aside and continued to take things out. This one was a bit bigger. It was a submachine gun and MP3008. Awesome. When luck comes, you really can't stop it. This was a real treasure. It was known as Germany's last submachine gun. Its background was similar to the Volkspistol, both being products of a final desperate effort. But that didn't mean the MP3008 was of poor quality. It was a good gun, also due to its extreme rarity. This submachine gun was a prized item sought after by many collectors. However, what puzzled him was that the charging handle of this MP3008 was on the left side, and the stock was not the metal one he had seen in museums, but a flat wooden one. A variant model? Mace muttered to himself. This was not the time or place for archaeology. He would pack it up first and study it after he got home. He continued to take things out. This time he pulled out a box of submachine gun bullets that had already developed a green patina. Similar square paper packages were neatly stacked, numbering in the hundreds by a rough count. He wasn't interested in bullets, so he didn't touch the rest. He grabbed a cylindrical paper package from the side next to the bullets. He tore open the oil paper. The contents inside almost made his heart stop. A mine! And it was a glass mine 43. Son of a bitch, what kind of sick bastard would put this thing here? Mason's face turned pale. He carefully placed the glass mine back in its original position and then gently unwrapped the remaining oil paper. We saw that the two intact unsafety pins were still inserted in the glass crevices. He collapsed to the ground. It wasn't that he was a coward. It was just that this thing was too insidious. Not only was it impervious to metal detectors, but this bowl-sized device was also insanely packed with a full 200 grams of TNT. If his hand had slipped just now and it had fallen, not even a god could have survived the blast. The remaining oil minus paper packages in the box were all cylindrical. Could this damn box be filled with glass mines? He carefully opened a few of the oil minus paper packages. Sure enough, you son of a bitch. There were at least 20 or 30 more glass mines in this box. If these went off, the explosion could probably be heard in the city over 20 kilometers away. It would be a huge loss tonight, just as his life was taking a turn for the better. Mason scrambled out of the pit, his heart pounding with fear. These glass mines had taught him a solid lesson. Professional digger teams had dedicated explosives disposal personnel, but even so, the number of diggers killed by explosions each year was in the double digits. If he acted recklessly just because he had them, he would sooner or later die to a self-minus detonating bomb. Calming down, Mace uncarefully placed the removed wooden slats back in place. He worked until it was completely dark before he finally filled in the pit. Feeling that it still wasn't safe enough, he went back to the van, got a marker in a storage box lid, and wrote glass bombs to meters underground as a warning sign, which he hung on the oak tree. After cleaning up everything, Mason had no interest in continuing his treasure hunt. Who knew what other troubles awaited him with the two remaining green arrows on the map? To be on the safe side, it was better to go home and figure out the bracelet first. Hey, how was your luck today? Find any treasures? Before the van even came to a complete stop, the loud, enthusiastic voice of his landlord and the owner of the URA antique shop, Big Ivan, came from inside the shop. Good stuff. I found a lot of treasures this time. Mason waved, signaling for Big Ivan to hurry over and help him move the boxes. Big Ivan's surname was Kolchak, a very old name, but the diggers in Smolensk preferred to call him Big Ivan, the one representing the hydrogen bomb. It was because this guy was just a powerful in the local area, both in terms of physical and social power. There were few who could gain an advantage in a fight with Big Ivan, and there were few in all walks of life that Big Ivan didn't know. Moreover, Big Ivan was nearly 2 meters tall. No matter the season, he was most often seen with a shaved head, a striped sailor shirt, camouflage ants, and big leather boots. At most, he would addle Argest-sized German camel haircoat in the winter. Because of this attire, he was often mistaken for a notorious skinhead, but he was actually good minus nature. A year ago, Mason, who hadn't even graduated from university, was tricked by a trading company into coming to Smolensk as a translator. Not only did he not receive his 3-month salary, but the boss of the trading company also ran off with the shareholders' money. At that time, the desperate Mason had nothing but a 2-year work visa. He didn't even have a place to eat or sleep. He was truly grateful to Big Ivan, who worked next door to the company, for giving him a job and a place to stay. Over the past year, Mason had not only learned a lot from Big Ivan, but Big Ivan had also lent him his entire set of digger equipment, including the van. You didn't dig up a Luger, did you? Big Ivan picked up the plastic box and walked into the shop. Although this young Chinese brother had been in the business for a short time, he had dug up a lot of treasures on the Smound's battlefield over the past year, and he had made a lot of money from the price difference. Every time he thought of this, Big Ivan was extremely grateful for his act of kindness back then. What was that Chinese saying he had recently learned? Good deeds are rewarded. It seemed to be something like that. Do you think Luger pistols are like Ukrainian girls in a nightclub? Mason picked up another plastic box and pointed his chin at the black garbage bag in the van. No Lugers and certainly no Ukrainian girls, but I do have to Germans. Just leave the Germans in the car. I'll take care of them tomorrow. Let's see your haul today. Big Ivan pulled down the rolling shutter, excitedly put on a pair of white gloves and turned on the desk lamp. Mace unknotted, opened the box, and started taking things out while explaining, I don't know what brand of vodka this is, one bottle found in a German artilleryman's belongings box. Also a Leica camera, but it seems to be broken. A Leica camera? Big Ivan exclaimed, carefully taking the sealed bag from Mason. Your luck is getting better and better? I think so too. Mace unsubconsciously touched the bracelet on his wrist and continued to take things out, along with the camera. There are 2 film canisters. I have a feeling the film inside might not have spoiled. See if you can find a channel to get this film developed. Hearing this, Big Ivan quickly put down the camera and took the canisters, examining them carefully. It's a good thing you didn't open them. I'll go see old Antoine tomorrow. He can definitely develop a few photos. These photos might be worth more than the camera. Besides the camera, there are also a few silver coins. As Mason spoke, he casually tossed a handful of coins into the Matryoshka doll piggy bank on the bar. These small things weren't worth much. As for the few Tangerine Elton coins, he had already put them in his waist bag. These coins wouldn't fetch a high price from Big Ivan. It was better to sell them online himself, where the price could be 50% higher. Anything else? All of this belonged to the same person. There are also some books which I plan to keep for my own collection. Mason took out the thread-bound books and showed them to Big Ivan, then began to open the second box. These were found at the second digging site. A well-preserved M35 helmet, and a pair of Spice Tex 30 brass binoculars with a bakelite case. This should be an early war product, finely made and still usable. Big Ivan took the binoculars and nodded in agreement. Indeed, in the later stages of the war, this model of binoculars was already made of aluminum or even bakelite. Anything else? Of course, the real treasures are next. Mason removed the divider in the box. The 2 guns found at the third digging site are the real treasures. Big Ivan's jaw dropped as he looked at the Volkspistol in Mason's hand. His breathing becoming heavier. Is this a Volkspistol? And a Volkssturm GE-Wehr? Mace unproudly slapped the pistol into Big Ivan's hand and took out the NB 3008 submachine gun from the bottom of the box. My dear Lenin, this is impossible. How could such a weapon appear in Smolensk? This kind of treasure is hard to find even in Germany. Big Ivan muttered over and over again, did you rob Hitler's grave? Say whatever you want. Give me an estimate. Mason rubbed his hands together proudly. The usual rules, only US dollars or MB, no rubles. Damn it, I'm starting to suspect that God is actually Chinese. Big Ivan clutched his heart, putting other things aside. These 2 guns are too valuable. To be honest, I'm short on cash right now and can't afford them. He wasn't lying. Although the Russian Federation did not ban guns, gun control was extremely strict. This led to the same gun being sold for at least 1-5 more in the Russian Federation than in North America or Europe. For collector-grade firearms, the price could even be 1-3 higher. It's okay. You can give me the quote first. Mason waved his hand dismissively. This was just the beginning. He still had 2 arrows on the map to dig up. Let's quote in US dollars. Big Ivan took a deep breath to calm down. This Volkspistol could sell for at least 10,000 US dollars. If it were sent to an auction house, it might sell for even more. The Volkssturm GE-Wehr. Damn it, this is the rarest wooden stock version. There's one just like it in a museum in Moscow brought back from Berlin by the Soviet Red Army. This type of submachine gun is very rare. There are no more than 15 recorded to exist. This submachine gun, I guess it could sell for about 50,000 US dollars. At least 50,000 US dollars, damn. Big Ivan let out a curse he had learned from Mason. I can accurately estimate the price of this submachine gun. To be honest, I've never handled one before. I've never even heard of anyone digging one up. What about the rest? Mason made a circle with his hand, pointing at the other things on the bar and asking, let's continue with the expensive ones. Big Ivan reluctantly put down the submachine gun and picked up the Leica camera. If this Leica camera can still be used after restoration, it could sell for 100,000 in US dollars. But unfortunately, both the shutter and the lens are rusted shut. It can only be used as a collectible in a glass cabinet, so I estimate it can sell for at most 5,000 US dollars. And that's only if we find a buyer who really likes it. If those 2 rolls of film can be developed into valuable photos, they might add a little more to the price when sold together. But unless the photos are particularly valuable, it won't exceed $10,000. Putting down the Leica camera, Big Ivan picked up the binoculars again. It's a pity it's not the Zeiss Tech 60 binoculars. Otherwise, it would be worth at least $5,000. This pair is in very good condition. It could sell for $1,500 to $2,000 to the right person. The rest of these aren't worth much. Big Ivan pointed at the remaining 2 items on the table and quickly quoted prices. The vodka's color shows it has gone bad, but the label is intact, so it's worth at most $100. You know, the price can go as high as 50,000 rubles, but that's for one in excellent condition. This N35's market price is at most 10,000 rubles. The purchase price is at most $70. As for the 2 Germans in the car, same as usual, $50 each. Mason nodded. Tell me your offer. I'll sell everything except for the film. If any photos can be developed, I'll need a few copies for myself. Hearing this, Big Ivan took out a calculator and started punching numbers furiously. I'll take everything except the Volkssturm G-Ware, the Volks pistol for $10,000 $8. I'll offer $30 minus $500 for the Leica camera and the film negative. $800 for the binoculars, $80 for the M35 helmet at market price, $100 for the 2 Germans. That's a total of $14,550. Let's make it $30,000. Mason waved his hand to let him finish. $30,000, and the submachine gun is yours too. But you have to help me with my work visa next year. My visa expires in 11 months. Also, I won't pay you rent for the attic anymore. If you can accept these terms, then all of this is yours. Although he knew Mason was returning a favor, Big Ivan couldn't find a reason to refuse. These treasures would greatly enhance the influence of the URA antique shop in the community. As soon as he spread the word, buyers would swarm in like wild dogs smelling meat. No matter what, he was making a huge profit this time. As for the work visa, it was not a problem at all. The URA antique shop itself could sign a labor contract with Mason. Whether he collected the 5,000 rubles in rent per month or not made no difference. That submachine gun could sell for at least $50,000. Congratulations on your fortune. Big Ivan extended his large hand and uttered a fluent Chinese phrase. May your wealth, Roland. Mason reached out his hand in a tacit agreement, sealing the deal. I only have less than $5,000 in the shop. It's too late today. How about I give you the money tomorrow morning? There's no rush for the money. If you're tight on cash, you can give it to me in a few days. Mace unwaved his hand dismissively. Being able to repay the favor meant far more to him than that submachine gun. He didn't have many expenses anyway. Now that he had a mysterious bracelet, he was confident he could dig up more treasures and make more money in the future. The next morning, Mason got up early as usual and started making breakfast. This was a habit he had developed since coming to Smolensk. As a native of northeast China, the Russian borscht and black bread didn't really appeal to him. So once his life stabilized, he started trying to make his own breakfast. As expected, Big Ivan appeared at the dining table on time, expertly helping to set the table. Having scrounged meals for Mason for a year, he had become proficient with chopsticks. The knives and forks in the kitchen hadn't been used in a long time. When Mason brought the last of the steamed pork buns from the steamer to the table, the 2 brothers began to plan their day's work while sipping hot corn porridge. Ivan, do you have any more World War II military maps of the Soviet and German sides? Mason asked casually. Of course, there are too many of those things. They don't sell for much. After we finish eating, take me to have a look. I'll pick a few to study. Hearing this, Big Ivan put down his meat bun, his eyes wide. You have a new clue. Mason shook his head and gave his planned excuse. It's precisely because I don't have any clues that I'm looking for some maps to study. I've been circling the battlefields of the 2 Smolensk campaigns for the past 6 months. I want to see if I can find some new leads. In fact, Mason wanted to see if he could burn a few more maps for the bracelet. Otherwise, what would he do after he dug up all the arrows? I have to go deal with the treasures you dug up after breakfast. And I also need to go to the bank to exchange some US dollars. Big Ivan calculated for a moment. If you're not going out this morning, help me watch the shop. Just sell, don't buy. The maps are in the paper box under the bar. They're all yours. Thanks a lot. Mason was overjoyed. Although Big Ivan said these maps were worthless, trying to collect them on his own would be a huge and inefficient task. After sending Big Ivan off with some meat buns, he didn't rush to help watch the shop. Instead, he took out the thread-bound books and the leather diary he had dug up yesterday. Compared to the function of the bracelet, he was more curious about why a German had a Chinese-style item. Perhaps because it had been buried for too long, the fountain pen ink in the diary had mostly faded. Fortunately, the handwriting was very neat. Mason translated it word by word with his phone and roughly learned that the diary's owner was a front-line artillery commander named Werner. There was no mention of the bracelet in the diary. However, he did recall from fragments of sentences that Werner's ancestors were soldiers who had invaded China and brought back a large amount of treasures and wealth. He, on the other hand, had only brought death and slaughter to the Soviet Union. It turned out this old fellow was quite the sentimentist. It seemed likely that this bracelet was stolen from China by Warner's father or grandfather. Although he didn't find any valuable information, Mason took the secret cautiously threw the diary into a metal bucket and burned it to ashes. Keeping these written things was a hidden danger. Who knew if Warner had any descendants who knew something? The secret of the bracelet was destined to be taken to the grave. It was enough that only he knew these secrets. He locked the remaining thread-bound books in a metal cabinet, and then went downstairs to open the rolling shutter of the URI antique shop. The antique shop was not large, occupying less than half of the ground floor. The merchandise in the shop consisted mostly of inexpensive souvenirs such as military uniforms, canteens, and commemorative badges from the former Soviet Union or the Russian army. But as the saying goes, the meat of the bun is not in the folds. The things on display were just a front to fool the Ministry of Internal Affairs police. The truly valuable items were all in the basement. You should know that operating a firearms business or dealing in anything with a swastika, the symbol, was illegal in the Russian Federation. If caught by the federal police, you could face a fine of tens of thousands of rubles at best. If you are unlucky, you could even go to jail. He skillfully found a large box full of military maps under the bar. These old maps were indeed not very valuable, so much so that Big Ivan couldn't be bothered to organize them. Both German and Soviet maps were all mixed together. Not daring to touch the maps directly with his left hand, Mason, like a one-armed man, sorted out the entire box of maps by category. These maps were mostly of Smolensk and its surrounding areas, with only a few maps of Stalingrad, now Volgograd, and Kursk mixed in. This was normal as they were collected from local diggers. Taking advantage of the empty shop, Mason took a deep breath and slowly pressed his left wrist onto a map. 1 second. 2 seconds. Half a minute passed. The map still lay peacefully on the glass counter. Is it broken? Unwilling to give up, Mason picked up a map and rubbed it repeatedly against the bracelet until the map was worn through, but the expected situation did not occur. What's going on? He picked up the maps one by one and tested them, but the result was like being plunged into an ice cave. Why isn't it working? Calm down. I must have not found the right way. Mason suppressed the panic in his heart and carefully recalled everything that had happened, assuming the function of absorbing maps hasn't failed. Then the only difference between these maps and the one from before is that I dug up that myself, while these maps belong to others. In other words, a possible prerequisite for the bracelet to absorb a map is that I must find it myself. There's a second possibility. Mason opened the map vision again, staring intently at the 2 remaining arrows on the map. The last possibility is that perhaps only after I've dug up these 2 remaining locations can the bracelet absorb the next map. Going around in circles, he found that no matter what, he had to keep digging. Only when he dug up another map himself, or when he had dug up the 2 existing locations, could he completely figure out the correct way to use the bracelet. Now that he had found a direction, all that was left was to dig along that direction. By comparing his phone's navigation with the map vision, Mace uneasily determined the specific locations of the last 2 arrows. Coincidentally, the last 2 green arrows were both in small towns in the suburbs. One was directly west of the city, and the other was slightly southeast of the south. I'll go to the one in the south first. Mace made the decision without hesitation. The URI antique shop was already in the south of the city. After leaving the city, the location was less than 10 kilometers away. If he moved quickly, he could make a round trip in at most an hour. He called Big Ivan, locked up the shop, and drove his old van out of the city like a whirlwind. Half an hour later, when Mason arrived at his destination, he was dumbfounded. The location this time was actually in an abandoned timber processing plant. Sneaking in was impossible. Most citizens of the Russian Federation owned guns. He didn't want to die at the hands of some Russian strongman's hunting rifle. Helplessly, he had to change his target and head to the last green arrow location. Damn it! Mason gritted his teeth and stared at the wooden house less than 10 meters in front of his van. This was even worse. The arrow was right inside this dilapidated wooden house. Giving up was not an option. If he didn't excavate these 2 locations, he would have no chance to verify his ideas. With no other choice, Mace unbraced himself and knocked on the door. The old, warped wooden door was pushed open a crack from the inside. A bald, fat man in a leather jacket peeked out from behind the door, warily eyeing the young Chinese man outside. Seeing the owner of the house, Mason's heart sank. Trouble. This son of a bitch is a skinhead. These scumbags were easy to spot. The swastika pendant around his neck was the best evidence. What do you want? The bald, fat man asked coldly after a moment of silence. Noticing that the man's hand was reaching for his lower back, Mace uncalmly took a step back and raised his hands. Friend, don't be hasty. I just want to do a little business with you. You better get out of this town before I shoot. What if I offer you 5,000 rubles to rent your house for an hour, just to take a few photos? Mason said as he backed away with his hands up. 5,000. Rent my house. The bald, fat man's hand paused as if he didn't understand what Mason was saying. How would you put the gun down first? Mason gestured with his eyes. I'm a friend of the owner of the URI antique shop, Big Ivan. Do you know Big Ivan? You, Big Ivan, that damn hydrogen bomb. The bald, fat man suddenly understood. I've heard of you, the Chinese guy at Big Ivan's shop. Mace unbreathed, a sigh of relief. Big Ivan's name really worked. I'm Liv. Just call me Liv. Big Ivan often talks about you. He says you make a very delicious Chinese pie. I think it's called Biao Ji. Liv's attitude improved a lot. At least he finally put his gun away. Mason smiled awkwardly. You can call me Yuri or my Chinese name, Mason. Come find me at the URI antique shop when you have time. I'll treat you to some bayazai. What the hell is Biao's BA? It's called Biao's eye. Are you afraid of pork and green nunyon filling? Tell me, what do you really want? Lev still didn't open the door, but the greed in his eyes was clearly visible to Mason. It's like this. Mason pointed at the house and gave the excuse he had just come up with. I'm planning to make a video about traditional Russia and rural architecture to share on a small, obscure website in China. I just happened to pass by and saw that this building is very distinctive and has a sense of history, so I want to take some photos and videos of it. 10,000. No, 20,000. Lev demanded an exorbitant price. Friend, you should know that there are many similar buildings in this town. Mace unmimicked the shape of a gun with his hand. And you don't seem very friendly to me. I can just ask someone else. Lev's expression changed. He abruptly changed the subject. First, tell me how you plan to shoot. I don't believe anyone would want to see this wreck of a house. Mason slowly took out his phone. I'll just use my phone to take some pictures of the internal structure and some local daily necessities. It won't involve your privacy. He had already given up on the idea of digging up any treasures from this house. As long as the green arrow in the map disappeared, he didn't mind if the scumbag kept whatever he found. He would just give him a free chance to get rich. 10,000 rubles. Lev finally opened the door. 10,000 rubles and you can shoot whatever you want. Trust me, this house is the most historic building in this town. My grandfather built it himself. Do I look like someone who's short of 1,000 minus plus yuan? Mesa nodded readily. Then in front of Lev, he called Big Ivan to tell him his specific location. Lev's face was ugly as he took the 5,000 rubles from Mason. He would get the rest after the photos were taken. But to be honest, if it weren't for that phone call, it would be hard to guarantee that this guy wouldn't play the role of a robber. Following the distance guidance on the map, Mason took dozens of meaningless photos inside the house. He finally steered the conversation towards the dusty accordion on top of the refrigerator. Lev, I didn't realize you could play the accordion. Mason asked knowingly. If this drug addict with needle marks all over his arm could play any instrument, he would live stream himself eating shit. Lev blushed and shamelessly boasted, of course. This accordion is a treasure left by my grandfather. I used to play Katyusha on it at school parties when I was young. That's a real shame, since it's a treasure left by your grandfather. Let's forget about it. Mason shook his head pretentiously and deliberately raised his phone to take a few close minus-ups of the accordion. Even if Lev was an idiot, he understood what Mason meant by now. What? You like accordions too? I can't play this kind of instrument. Mason shook his head in regret. But I watched a lot of movies about the Soviet Union when I was a kid, and I have a deep impression of this romantic instrument. I was thinking of buying it, but I didn't expect it to be your grandfather's heirloom. 100,000 rubles. Lev didn't bother with pretenses anymore. For just 100,000 rubles, this accordion is yours. You know, I work at Big Ivan's shop, so it's inevitable that I'd like some historical things. But I'm not a fool. Mason reached out and touched the accordion, then wiped the dust off his clothes. It's not worth 100,000, even a new one isn't worth that much. And look, its bellows are cracked. How much are you willing to pay to take it away? Lev asked eagerly. It was rare to find a rich fool, and he didn't want to miss the opportunity to make money. Besides, he had tried to sell all the old minus-looking things in this house before. The highest offer for this accordion was no more than 10,000 rubles. 20,000 rubles. Mason opened a shopping app and showed it to Lev. This is a Chinese online shopping platform, and the prices are in or MB. Look, a new accordion only costs a little over 2,000 or MB converted to rubles. Okay, it's a deal. Before Mason could finish, Lev nimbly took the accordion from the refrigerator and shoved it into Mason's arms. In his haste, he even accidentally dropped the TT-33 pistol tucked into his waistband onto the garbage-strewn floor. Oh, including the filming fee, that's 5,000 rubles in total. Here you go. With the transaction complete, Mason held the accordion and fled Lev's den as if his life depended on it. He didn't want to stick around and get shot. He drove the van back to the URI antique shop. Mason rushed into his room, holding the accordion. When he got the accordion, the green arrow on the map had already disappeared. As expected, there was definitely a secret hidden in this old accordion. He borrowed Big Ivan's tools for restoring antiques and took the accordion apart. Sure enough, a square army-green canvas pouch was fixed to the inner wall of the bellows. He opened the canvas pouch. The first thing that caught his attention was a Walther PPK pistol soaked in gun oil. This black pistol was fitted with expensive ivory grip panels. One of the ivory panels was engraved with 1939 caped in 2762. The other was engraved with an oval pattern with a sickle, a hammer, and a sword in the middle. Why does this pattern look so familiar? Mason put down the pistol and continued to take things out of the canvas pouch. Besides the pistol, there was also a folded blue minus popped peak cap in the canvas pouch. When he unfolded the cap, a flash of lightning went through Mason's mind. He finally remembered where he had seen that pattern. The People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. The pattern on the pistol grip was the emblem of the former Soviet People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. Many people might not know about the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs, but many have definitely heard of the KGB. The former was the predecessor of the KGB. If we go even further back in time, even the Ministry of Internal Affairs, to which the current Russian Federation police belong, can be considered a successor to this violent organization. Coupled with this iconic blue minus stopped peak capping, the text engraved on the other side of the pistol grip, Mason couldn't help but shudder violently. It can't be that, can it? Mason suppressed the speculation in his heart and tremblingly reached into the canvas pouch to take out more things. This time, he pulled out a thin cowhide envelope. The envelope was not sealed. A first minus class order of the Patriotic War was pinned where the stamp would have been. Holy shit, Mason cursed, carefully tipping a yellowed letter out of the envelope. I am Oleg Block HIN, one of the executioners who massacred the Poles in the Katyn Forest in 1939, and also a hero who was awarded the first minus class order of the Patriotic War of the Soviet Union. The so minus called hero is probably more of a mockery of the crimes I once committed. In 1939, I used this pistol confiscated from a German spy to kill 2762 Poles. They were prisoners of war spies, but more were innocent civilians and doctors. From then on, I was forever plunged into endless remorse. When I killed the Poles, I also shot my own conscience. I can feel that my time is running out. Today, I am sealing this letter of confession, along with all the memories of that massacre, in my beloved accordion. Perhaps one day after my death, my dear little grandson Lev will discover that the grandfather he worships as a hero is not only a coward, but also a butcher with blood on his hands. This world is truly ironic. Oleg Block HIN, 13, for 1990. This is a real murder weapon. Gently putting down the yellowed letter, Mason picked up the pistol that smelled of gun oil again. It was hard to imagine that this exquisite and compact pistol, which looked more like a work of art, had slaughtered more than 2,000 lives. So you're telling me you just went out to take a few photos at noon and found this treasure? Inside the U.R.I. antique shop, Big Ivan stared at Mason, who was lounging on the sofa counting his money, as if he were looking at a monster. An accident. Mason stuffed $30,000 in cash into the waist pack he never took off. He pointed at the PPK pistol on the coffee table to change the subject. Never mind how I found it. Are you interested in collecting this gun? You're not keeping it, Big Ivan asked, both surprised and delighted. Didn't you always want a pistol for self-defense? Even if I wanted a gun for self-defense, I wouldn't want this murder weapon that killed over 2,000 people. Ever since he learned the history behind this gun, Mason didn't even want to touch it anymore. Although he was fearless when excavating war relics and didn't care about the terrifying corpses, he was at heart a traditional Chinese man. In Mason's view, excavating the remains of Soviet and German soldiers was like helping these soldiers who couldn't go home find their final resting place. It was a good deed that accumulated positive karma, so he wasn't repulsed or afraid. But this gun was different. What was the difference between collecting this and collecting an executioner's beheading axe? Only someone with a hole in their head would want to use this for self-defense. Unlike Mason, Big Ivan had taken a liking to this legendary weapon at first sight. If his transaction with Mason yesterday hadn't emptied his wallet, he would have already proposed a deal. This was a weapon that had killed over 2,000 Poles. No Soviet person would dislike it. In fact, to broaden the scope of it, no European outside of Pole and would dislike it. There was a saying that was very popular in Europe: Pole and is the doormat of Europe. Both the Germans and the Soviets liked to step on it before they left. As the saying goes, a pitiful person must have a hateful side. Poland was indeed not a likable country. Otherwise, why would both the Soviet and German sides have chosen Poland as their first battlefield at the start of World War II? Hitler carried out a massacre in the Polish capital of Warsaw shortly after the war began. Before Poland could recover, the Soviet war machine plowed through it again. All of this, in the end, was retaliation against a Pole that couldn't pick a side. If that's still not a clear enough picture of Poland, then you can think of the great nation of South Korea. To some extent, Poland was the European equivalent of South Korea. Their own strength was mediocre, yet they were arrogant and overbearing, and they could never see their own position clearly, always choosing the wrong side. A brief silence fell over the U.R.A. antique shop. Big Ivan reluctantly put down the PPK pistol. I really like this gun, but yesterday's deal cleaned out my cash, so I can't afford it for now. If you're willing to trade it for something else, maybe I can offer a treasure you'll like. The People's submachine gun had already given Mace a huge advantage. Big Ivan really couldn't bring himself to ask for credit. He could only propose another form of transaction. Trade for something else, a treasure I'd like. Big Ivan's words piqued Mason's interest. He had lived upstairs at the URA antique shop for over a year, and had even worked in this little shop for almost half a year. He really didn't know what other precious collections Big Ivan had that he hadn't seen. Come with me, I'll take you to see my private treasury. With that, Big Ivan stood up and led Mason to the garage, where he lifted a manhole cover in the corner. This was the entrance to the URA antique shop's basement, or rather, this was the real URA antique shop. Following the stairs down from the manhole, they descended 4 or 5 meters. Mason followed Big Ivan through a locked blast door. Behind the blast door, a space of over 100 square meters was filled with rows of displaced elves. All sorts of antique World War II firearms and rare items with swastika, a symbol that couldn't be seen on the surface, were neatly arranged by category. Having been with Big Ivan for a year, Mason had only been here twice in total, but each time it had broadened his horizons. This time was probably no exception. Big Ivan led the way through the rows of displaced elves and then, under Mason's astonished gaze, pushed aside an earthy wooden bin. On the floor, where the bed had been, was a square steel plate a meter wide. Come with me, these are all my treasures. Big Ivan lifted the steel plate and proudly led Mason further down. It was an underground space of only 10 square meters. Although this basement under the basement was not large, it was 5 meters high. The surrounding walls were made of thick reinforced concrete. The shelves against the walls were piled high with Russian Federation individual combat rations and barrels of drinking water. Next to the shelves were all kinds of light and heavy weapons and ammunition. Mason even saw several boxes of RPG rocket launcher ammunition in the corner. Don't be surprised. This kind of underground shelter was a feature of the Cold War. At that time, the whole world was trembling under the threat of nuclear war. Almost every building had this kind of underground shelter. I've just let this place continue to serve its original function. Mason nodded in agreement. It wasn't just the Soviets. Didn't China also have the deep tunnels, store abundant grain policy back then? China's civil defense projects were just as impressive, if not more so. While chatting with Mason about Cold War stories, Big Ivan took a dusty walnut gun case from the very corner shelf. Open it and have a look. Although this gun is not as precious as that PPK, it's the best handgun I have here. Is this a SIGP 210? Mason opened the gun case in confusion. He recognized the famous gun that collectors coveted at a glance. To be precise, it's a SIGP 210 minus a model or the P49 military version in 9mm caliber. This gun is one of the 890-6 early prototypes. You can tell from the serial number on the gun. The serial numbers of the early prototypes range from 6030 to 6924. This gun's serial number is 6677. I can't believe you have such a treasure. Mason played with the handgun, unable to put it down. This gun was much more beautiful than a TT-33. I got this gun when I was just starting out in the business. I traded a Waffen-SS ring and an artillery model Luger P pistol for it from a very famous collector in the community. What's most rare about it is that it's still in its factory condition. Before you saw it, it had never fired a full magazine except for the pre-factory test firing. Big Ivan looked pained as he said this. If it weren't for Mason's PPK pistol and to return the favor, he would never have taken this gun out. It was more precious and rarer than the so-called 700th anniversary commemorative model of Switzerland. After all, the former represented history, while the latter was just a gimmick. Deal. Congratulations on your fortune. Mason picked up the walnut gun case and said excitedly. The gun case was large, and the contents were complete. A sight adjustment tool, a cleaning rod, a wire brush, a gun oil bottle, 2 spare magazines, a spare barrel, and the original factory test target were all there, coupled with the hard walnut gun case that housed all of the above. The price of this entire set was no less than that of the PPK with its remarkable history. May your well Throlin. Big Ivan let out a long breath and happily uttered the idiom he always said after a successful deal with Mason. He carefully closed the gun case lid. Mason looked up. Ivan, besides the PPK I got by accident, I also found some clues. Are you interested in digging them up with me? You found more treasures. Big Ivan's eyes widened. What was wrong with this guy recently? He was digging up treasures more frequently than he masturbated. Let's go upstairs and talk. This time it's a bit tricky. Let's talk as we walk. Big Ivan waved him on. I was originally going out today to verify a clue, but when I got there, I found that the place was an abandoned timber processing plant. Mason took out his phone, opened the map, and showed Big Ivan the location of the last arrow. Isn't this the abandoned lumber mill outside the city? This lumber mill is over 100 years old. How did you find this place? I got a clue by accident. It seems there's something in this lumber mill. Mason said vaguely, unable to explain the map arrow. Big Ivan nodded without asking for details. Every professional digger had their own sources of information, and he certainly wouldn't break the rules by getting to the bottom of it. As long as they found treasure, it didn't matter how they found it. What are the chances? Big Ivan asked the key question after a long silence. At least 70%. This lumber mill was closed down 7 or 8 years ago due to economic problems. I'm sure there's no one guarding it. Shall we go take a look now? Will there be trouble? Mason asked worriedly. He had no idea what kind of treasure he would dig up this time. What trouble could there be? Big Ivan grabbed the car keys from the bar. We're relatively law-minus abiding. Some scumbags even dare to dig up the graves of Soviet martyrs. Although he said that, Big Ivan still took out a black ID from the drawer, having this can avoid a lot of trouble. Where did you get a federal police ID? It's fake, but it's good enough to fool ordinary people. The two brothers drove to the lumber mill before the sun had set. Big Ivan rove the car to the side of the wall, then brazenly climbed onto the roof and jumped over. Soon after, the almost rusted minus-through iron gate of the lumber mill opened from the inside. Mason quickly drove the van in. This lumber mill is quite large. Do you have a specific location? Big Ivan asked as he closed the factory gate. Come with me. Mason secretly opened the map vision, surreptitiously glancing at Big Ivan's expression. He confirmed once again that only he could see the strange vision in his eye. Breathing a sigh of relief, Mace unfollowed the arrow's guidance, weaving through the area until he found a small, dilapidated, and remote house. If my clue is correct, the treasure should be in the basement of this house. A basement, another basement. It was just that the basement of this house was not as hidden as the one in Big Ivan's shop. After clearing away the old furniture that filled the stairwell, the two brothers turned on their high-minus powered lanterns and entered the dusty underground space. This basement was even smaller, no more than 4 or 5 square meters at most. It was completely empty, without even a single mouse. Are you sure this is the place? Big Ivan knocked on the wall suspiciously. Dust and dirt fell in showers. The place seemed to be in danger of collapsing at any moment. This isn't. Mace unpointed at the floor under his feet. Let's look around together. It should be buried somewhere. In the map vision, he was still less than 3 meters away from the arrow, but this time Mason planned to let Big Ivan be the one to discover it. Let's look. Big Ivan excitedly took out his entrenching tool. He wasn't really a digger. To be precise, Big Ivan was more like a middleman. Although he had been to many excavation sites, he had rarely dug himself. The basement was not large. It took the two brothers less than 10 minutes before Big Ivan, with the sound of iron hitting something, finally found something unusual. Over here. I finally found it, Mason thought, feigning surprise as he came over to help Big Ivan clear the dirt covering the surface. Damn, this looks like the hatch from a T-34 tank turret. Did we dig up a tank? With that, Big Ivan tossed his shovel aside and forcefully lifted the green-painted hatch. Beneath the hatch was a deep hole only half a meter in diameter. I'll go down. Your waist will definitely get stuck, Mason said, holding back a laugh as he put on his headlamp. Be careful, there might be traps inside. Don't worry. Mason confidently squeezed into the hole. The space inside was not large. After getting in, he couldn't even stand up straight, but the treasures inside dazzled him. Ivan, we found treasure. What's inside? Big Ivan asked anxiously. PPSh submachine guns. There's a whole box of them here. Wait, what's this? You bastard. Don't just study them in there. Hurry up and bring the treasures out. Big Ivan urged in a low, urgent voice. Coming. The opening is too small. I can only bring them out one by one. As he spoke, 2 almost brand-minus new PPSh submachine guns appeared at the opening of the hole. Hurry up and take them. There's still a lot of stuff inside. As more and more things were passed up, Big Ivan's breathing became heavier and heavier. PPSh submachine guns. A full 20-8 of them in good condition. There were even to super-long PT or S-41 anti-ank rifles. Ivan, there are still several large boxes of ammunition and some oversized grenades inside. They're in good condition. Do you want them? Mason's voice sounded a bit muffled from underground. Yes, I want them all. Don't leave a single shell casing in. Big Ivan shouted excitedly. Those oversized grenades should be anti-ank grenades. Run one out for me to see what model it is before we decide whether to them. Here you go. Carefully taking the ridiculously large grenade. Big Ivan only glanced at it. These are RPG-43 anti-ank grenades, the world's first anti-ank grenade to use the shaped charge principle for armor penetration. As long as the safety pin hasn't been pulled, they're safe, but let's leave these grenades here. They're not worth much. Mason asked, poking his head out of the hole like a gopher. Your country bought a lot of these anti-ank grenades when you fought the Americans in the Korean War. You even copied and exported them to the rest of the world later, so this thing isn't worth much. Besides, this isn't the era right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. These old things can't be sold at all. Even possessing them is a big problem. So let's leave them here. I'll find a way to notify the Federal Explosives Disposal Department to come and clean up tomorrow. I'll listen to you. Mesa nodded and resumed his work of moving the items. A professional should do a professional's job. He considered himself a good treasure hunter, but when it came to cashing in on the treasures, he was no match for Big Ivan. In fact, in all of Smolensk, if even Big Ivan found it hard to sell something, then no one else could find a better sales channel. After working for a full hour, the two brothers had moved over 10,000 rounds of various types of ammunition out of the basement. Besides the ammunition and the previously discovered submachine guns and anti-minus tank rifles, Mason also found a well-minus preserved Mos E-minus Nugget 1090 130th sniper rifle in one of the ammunition boxes. After a great deal of effort, they loaded all the discoveries into the van. The two brothers returned to the antique shop's garage under the cover of night. This was a big haul. In the basement, Big Ivan excitedly opened a bottle of vodka to celebrate. Let's estimate the price. We'll split it 50 minus 50. Mason downed the strong liquor in his enamel mug in one gulp. Compared to the haul, the disappearing arrow in his vision excited him even more. He could find out later if the bracelet could absorb a new map. Forget about splitting it 50 minus 50. I already got a good deal on that PPK and the submachine gun from before, and I didn't help much this time. Big Ivan waved his hand, refusing Mason's proposal. He then began to estimate the price. Let's settle in US dollars. The market price for a well-minus preserved PPSh is over 1,500 US dollars. My purchase price is 1,000 US dollars. The PT or S minus 41 anti-minus tank rifle can probably sell for around 3,000 US dollars. There are many of these big guys around, but my purchase price is at most 1,300 US dollars each. It will take time to sell them. I don't know if I can find any rich people willing to collect them. The Mos E-minus sniper rifle isn't worth much. There are too many of them. The market price is at most $500 to $1,000. Although this Mos E-minus the gun is in very good condition, it's missing some of its accessories. So assuming it can still fire, it can sell for at most $600. The purchase price is no more than $300. At this point, Big Ivan paused and pointed at the ammunition boxes piled high on the flatbed cart. The truly valuable things are these usable antique bullets. The bullets are worth more than the guns. Mason looked at Big Ivan curiously. Of course not. Big Ivan shook his head. It's just that many collectors who are keen on collecting old guns have a penchant for hoarding antique bullets. These bullets are very well preserved. The market price is about 100 rubles per round. There are definitely over 10,000 rounds here. In other words, these bullets can sell for about 15,000 US dollars. What's the purchase price? 30 rubles per round. You shark, Mason said with a laugh and extended his hand. Congratulations on your fortune. May your wealth roll in. After striking the deal, Big Ivan explained, these bullets are more like a gamble. No one knows which bullet can still be used before it's fired. This is the fun that those rich people like. With that, Big Ivan took out his calculator. Let's calculate the bullets at 10,000 rounds. 30 rubles per round, that's 300,000 rubles in total, which is 4,630 minus 2 US dollars. The purchase price for 20 minus PPSh of machine guns is 20 minus 8,000 US dollars. 2 anti-minus tank rifles for 20 minus 600 US dollars. 1 Mos E-minus Nugget for 300 US dollars. That's a total of, let me see, 30 minus 530 minus 2 US dollars. Having ran it to 30 minus 5,500 US dollars. Big Ivan was a bit embarrassed. He had just said in the afternoon that he didn't want to buy on credit, and now he was eating his own words in the evening, that he had no choice. He had to take this batch of hot items. He was confident that he could sell them all in at most a week. There's no rush for the money. You can pay me when you have it. Mason waved his hand dismissively. His savings had skyrocketed from less than 3,000 US dollars to over 70,000, and less than 70 minus 2 hours. What more could he ask for? Besides, he trusted Big Ivan. They would have plenty of opportunities to cooperate in the future. And compared to all this, he was more eager to go back to his room to study the bracelet and the handgun he had traded from Big Ivan in the afternoon. After dinner, Mason returned to his room and eagerly spread out an old map he had chosen earlier on the glass table. It was a German map of Kursk with a very large scale. The center of the map was Kursk, and the edges even showed a part of Ukraine. Mason greedily thought that if he were to choose a map, he should choose a large one. The larger the map, the more arrows might appear and the more treasures he could dig up. It's all or nothing now. Mason's only pressed his wrist onto the spread minus out map. 1 second. In just 1 second, the map on the glass counter turned into gray dust as if it had been rapidly oxidized. Overjoyed and surprised, a map entered on Kursk slowly unrolled in Mason's left eye's vision. Why is there only one arrow? Mason stared at the only green arrow on the map, dumbfounded. One is better than none. He compared it with his phone's map. The arrow is located in a forest south of Kursk, near the Ukrainian border. If he wanted to dig at this spot, he would have to take a long trip. It was already the end of October, and the weather was getting colder every day. He didn't have much time left. If he waited until the ground froze, he would have to wait until next year. That's right, even diggers had their peak and off-minus seasons. Generally speaking, the most active time for diggers was in early spring when the ground had just thawed until the beginning of summer, and in late autumn until the arrival of winter. In the real summer, the wilderness was damp, and the mosquitoes alone were a hassle. Not to mention that most of the places where World War II relics were minus preserved were swamps. It was not uncommon for people and equipment to get stuck and unable to get out. As for winter, it goes without saying. The ground was frozen solid, and sometimes even an excavator was useless. So, most professional diggers chose to take a vacation and relax in the winter. The more diligent ones would be busy collecting clues. During the hottest part of summer, the diggers stopped working again. Their main job during this period was to sell or restore the treasures they had dug up. All in all, no profession was easy. Digging, a job that involved dealing with mud and bones every day, was a dirty and tiring job. It wasn't even uncommon for some unlucky ones to accidentally dig up explosives and die. The most sensible decision was to dig up the spot as soon as possible during the last golden month of the year, caching, and then go back to China to prepare for the new year. Planning his next move, Mason cleaned the ashes off the table and eagerly opened the gun case he had traded for in the afternoon. What man doesn't love guns? He had been a military enthusiast since he was a student back in China. It was just that due to the environment, he had never had the chance to come into contact with these firearms. He gently picked up the SIGP 210 from a wooden gun case. After a brief family Azerian, he disassembled the handgun. He had played with the TT-33 pistol in Big Ivan's drawer quite a bit. Guns weren't complicated, they were all pretty much the same. Big Ivan hadn't lied to him. This gun was indeed very well preserved. Every part was coated in a thick layer of gun oil. There was no trace of it ever being fired in the chamber, only the strong smell of gun oil. It seemed that the previous owners of this gun had all treated it as a collector's item. After checking all the parts, Mason contentedly reassembled the handgun and put it back in the gun case. Even he wouldn't be willing to use it lightly. That would be a waste of a good thing. With the magical bracelet, a huge amount of savings, and a rare collectible, Mason lay on his bed feeling a little smug. The next morning, Mason woke up with dark circles under his eyes and groggily started preparing breakfast. He had been unable to sleep last night. "Ivan, I'm going to Kursk. Do you want to come with me?" At the dining table, Mason asked tentatively. Another clue. Big Ivan's hand trembled, and the coffee in his cup spilled onto the table. "Not sure yet. I'm going to check it out first," Mason said ambiguously. "You have to be careful." Big Ivan nodded. Many places there have been designated as war relic protection zones, and digging is prohibited. Don't worry, I'm just going there to look for clues. The few places I'm planning to go are far from the war relic protection zones. When are you leaving? In about an hour, Mason replied. So soon? It seems I don't have time to go with you. I have a client coming to see the Volkspistol you dug up today. Big Ivan regretfully gave him the middle finger. If you find any treasures, remember to call me. Of course. After breakfast, Mason said goodbye to Big Ivan and drove straight to Kursk. 500 kilometers was not a short distance. By the time he arrived at his destination, it was already after 8 o'clock in the evening. If the road conditions hadn't been so bad, he might have arrived earlier. Since there was only one spot, he decided to find a small inn to stay for the night. Given the terrifying experience of digging up the glass mine last time, Mason did not act rashly. It had been buried for almost 100 years. One more day would make a difference. After a good night's rest, Mason drove his van to his destination the next morning full of energy. He drove along the abandoned logging road until it ended. The remaining 300 meters were completely hidden in the depths of a mixed forest. It's a good place to dig for treasure. Mace uncleared the branches along the way with a machete. There was no sign of human activity in this godforsaken place. It seemed that even the local diggers didn't think there were any treasures to be found here. As he got closer, the terrain gradually rose. By the time he was less than 5 meters away from the green arrow, a long, large mound of earth had appeared before him. The mound was covered in weeds and shrubs, looking like a large, hairy caterpillar from a distance. This must be it. He weighed the shovel in his hand. This was going to be a lot of work. The soil layer was over a meter thick. Could this mound be hollow inside? With this question in mind, Mason cleared the weeds under his feet and began to dig into the mound. Could it be an underground fortress? The deeper he dug, the more questions he had. The soil of this mound was very clean. After a few shovel-ls, he couldn't even find a large piece of gravel. And the deeper he dug, the softer the soil became. This further proved that this mound was man-made. Thump. The familiar dull sound told him that he had definitely hit wood. He had only dug less than a meter. Even the soil covering the shelter of a trench shouldn't be this thin. Mason didn't dare to violently chop the log he had just dug up. This mound was too big. If he accidentally caused a collapse, it could be fatal. After digging for another hour, a row of tightly packed, charred logs, each as thick as a calf, appeared before him. The closer he got to the answer, the more cautious Mason became. He took out a folding saw from his tool bag and slowly sawed along the gap between the logs. Fortunately, these logs had been buried for a long time. The loose wood did not take him too much time. In just 5 minutes, a log was sawn in half. He shone his flashlight inside. With just one look, Mason was so scared that he sat down on the ground. A tank. There seems to be a tank inside. Through the gap between the logs, Mason stared mesmerized at the massive gun muzzle. Due to the viewing angle, he could only see the tank's gun barrel and its thick chassis. But no matter what, it was definitely a tank. I have to dig it out and see. Such a huge discovery instantly filled him with energy. The folding saw in his hand moved quickly. After another half hour, he finally cut out a small opening 1/2 meter wide and 1 meter high. He stooped and squeezed into the dark underground space. Under the illumination of his high-powered headlamp, he finally saw what kind of treasure he had dug up. Holy shit. Holy shit. Mason's jaw dropped. He stared in awe at the behemoth that filled almost his entire vision. The soaring, massive gun barrel, the dull and mottled imperial gray paint, and the unique shape of its armor all pointed to its identity. Wah! Mace unplanted a firm kiss on the bracelet on his wrist. A panther. It was actually a panther. He would never have imagined that he would find a panther. A 40-5- ton beast of war. I'm rich. I'm rich. Mason was ecstatic. This was one of the most successful tanks of World War II. Its discovery meant a huge amount of US dollars. But on the other hand, if not handled properly, it could also bring trouble, even death. Calming down, Mason broke out in a cold sweat. Finding a panther was a good thing, but if he didn't handle it well, it would be a huge crisis. Besides the hidden dangers, how to transport it away without anyone knowing was also a problem. Looking at the structure of this underground space, it should be a temporary tank repair station for the German army during the Battle of Kursk. The space above was only supported by steel frames and sheet iron. Some parts had even rusted through with mounds of dirt leaking down. There were pros and cons. The good thing was that it was easy to destroy the evidence. He believed that as long as he destroyed the supporting structure, this fragile underground space would collapse in an instant. But the bad thing was the same. It would require extreme care to get the tank out without causing a collapse. Once the roof collapsed, before the tank was out, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time to get this 40-5- behemoth out. After thinking for a long time, Mason climbed out of the underground space and continued to wield his entrenching tool with all his might. This time, he wasn't digging, but burying. He filled the hole he had dug, and then dug up pieces of turf from a distance to cover the traces of excavation. Before his help arrived, he had to make sure that no one discovered this place. Big Ivan, is it convenient to talk now? Mason returned to the van. After thinking for a long time, called Big Ivan. What is it? Find a place where no one is around. Big business. Wait a moment. The other end of the line went silent. After a full 3 minutes, he finally heard Big Ivan say, I'm in the attic now. No one is around. What did you find? A tank. A complete tank, Mason whispered excitedly. A tank? What model? Big Ivan's voice trembled. He was clearly shocked by the news. Digging up a tank and digging up a complete tank had completely different meanings in the digger community. Don't worry about the model for now. Come to Kursk right away. Then find a flatbed trailer with a large enough payload and a bulldozer with enough power. When you're ready, send me a WeChat message and remember to come alone. Got it. I'll be there this afternoon. Big Ivan hung up the phone decisively without asking any more questions. He understood that the more ambiguous Mason was at this time, the more unusual the tank he had dug up was. Moreover, he had specifically mentioned sending a WeChat message. This was a communication method that the two of them only used for large transactions for security reasons. After hanging up the phone, Mason rove the van deep into the bushes to hide it. He had to be cautious at this time. He didn't want any complications. From morning to noon, from noon to afternoon, until it was almost dark, Big Ivan's call finally came. Brother, I'm in Kursk. Where are you? I'll send you the location on WeChat. After hanging up the phone again, Mace checked the SIGP-210 he held tightly in his hand. He had packed it in his bag when he set out yesterday. He had originally just wanted to play with it while digging for treasure. Now he might have to use it for self-defense. He filled the magazine, which could only hold 8 rounds, pushed around into the chamber. This old gun, which had been silent for more than half a century, was ready to provide accurate firepower for its new owner at any time. It wasn't that he didn't trust Big Ivan. It was just that wealth could corrupt people. Mason didn't want to bet his life on Big Ivan's character. Just after 8 o'clock in the evening, the dark forest was illuminated by blinding car headlights. A heavy flatbed trailer carrying a half-new excavator drove onto the abandoned logging road in the forest. He parked the car and turned off the engine. Big Ivan jumped out of the driver's cabin and walked towards Mason. What did you find? As he spoke, Big Ivan raised his hands and showed them to Mason in a circle. He then threw the trailer keys to Mason from a distance. This guy was also meticulous. Mason had thought of it, and so had he. On this cold day, he had deliberately worn a pair of tight sweatpants. His upper body was a tight fitting wrong sleeved sailor shirt. His body lines were in full display, and it also clearly told Mason that he was not carrying any weapons. Stop spinning. I'm not interested in your muscles. Mace unrelaxed a little and pointed at the bushes behind him. I found a panther. So it's a panther? What? A panther? A panther tank? Big Ivan reacted, his jaw dropping. You mean a panther tank? The Germans' Panzerwehr. You're not mistaken. Well, no, we dig it out. I'll lead the way. You drive the bulldozer and clear a path first. You're amazing. Big Ivan punched Mason in the chest excitedly. He almost lost his footing and fell when he climbed onto the flatbed trailer. Mason led the way, and Big Ivan followed behind, driving a bulldozer converted from a T-30 tank. As it quickly clearing a path, in less than an hour, they had cleared a 3-meter wide clearing in the forest. This is it. Dig horizontally along the tracks I just dug. The internal structure is very fragile. Be careful. Mason stood on the side of the driver's cabin and pointed at the mound in front of him. Leave it to me. Big Ivan rubbed his hands and started clearing the overlying soil and the logs below with the bulldozer. This was much faster than Mason using a shovel. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, one end of the long mound had been cut off, completely revealing the panther inside. Yuri, do you know what you found? Big Ivan muttered in shock. The space under the mound was for meters wide and over 15 meters deep. The huge panther tanks sat quietly in the center of the underground space. The 70- caliber 75 gun barrel pointed straight at the two brothers. Even after more than half a century, it still sent a chill down their spines as they stood in front of it. A panther. It should be worth a lot of money, right? Mace murmured. Panther? Big Ivan contemptuously tossed a Marlboro cigarette at him. This is no ordinary panther. See the circular muzzle brake on the gun, and this ridiculously bald turret. If I'm not mistaken, this is definitely a Panther Ausf. Is this model very special? Mace asked doubtfully. He was satisfied just being able to roughly identify the tank by its appearance. He couldn't compare to Big Ivan, an old hand who had been in the military circle for years. Special? Of course it's special. Big Ivan climbed onto the tank and kicked the turret hatch. The Panther Ausf was the first model of the Panther tank. The Panther series of tanks first saw combat in the Battle of Kursk, but due to some unreasonable design of the gearbox and other transmission structures, only 530-4 of this model were produced. The only Panther Ausf that can still be found in the world today seems to be a piece of scrap metal in a museum in the Netherlands that can't be started at all. Big Ivan suddenly jumped off the tank. Do you think this Panther can still be started? Started? Mason didn't answer right away. He first walked around the Panther and found that it was not completely intact. The right track had been disassembled, and the broken road wheel had not been completely removed before the repair work stopped. Under the bright lights of the bulldozer, the two brothers could even see a nut that had only been half-tightened. It was almost imaginable that this damaged Panther had just been sent to the repair point when it encountered a major defeat. The repair team and the crew only had time to hastily bury the entrance of the repair point. For more than half a century after that, they never had the chance to counterattack. Perhaps it really has a chance to become the last operational Panther Ausf tank in the world, but the most important thing now is how to transport it home safely. Mace unpadded Big Ivan's shoulder. Don't forget, this is a 40-5- behemoth. That's easy. I'll clear a path later and then pull it out with the bulldozer. Luckily, this is a gentle slope. As long as I operate it carefully, I can get it to the logging road without too much trouble. Big Ivan exited the repair station and looked around at the surrounding terrain. Let's find a way to get it onto the truck first. We'll talk about the rest later. Are you sure this broken bulldozer can pull 40-5 tons? The T-30 is no worse than this big cat. Big Ivan confidently patted his chest in assurance. This guy seemed to have been prepared. He took a set of pulleys from the back of the bulldozer and fixed it to the trunk of a pine tree, as thick as a waist about 10 meters away. Then he connected the towing hook on the Panther's chest, the pulley set, and the bulldozer with a steel cable. With the help of the pulley force distribution device, the bulldozer could easily exert 3 times its own pulling force. With a roar, the steel cable as thick as a bin, and it gradually tightened. The huge Panther shook off the mud all over its body and slowly revealed its long and thick gun barrel. While Big Ivan was operating the bulldozer to pull out the Panther, Mason was not idle. He had already ventured into the repair station to see if there were any other gains. And there were. Behind the Panther, he not only found a spare road wheel in the disassembled track, but also a half-track motorcycle covered by a canvas waiting for repair. This was an unexpected surprise. Mace unran all the way back to the logging road, turned the flatbed trailer around, and lowered the rear of the trailer facing the temporarily cleared area. The bulldozer, spewing black smoke, dragged the Panther all the way to the back of the trailer. Then it unhooked the towing cable and pushed it onto the waiting flatbed trailer. Don't worry about that motorcycle for now. Cover it with a canvas first. Mace unshouted to Big Ivan. To hide the tank's silhouette, the two brothers first cut a lot of branches and piled them on the tank's body, then covered it with a thick canvas and tied it securely. Now, unless someone lifted the canvas, no one would know that the trailer was carrying a priceless steel beast. The bulldozer went back and forth, first the broken track, then the road, wheel, and a complete set of repair tools, and finally the half-track motorcycle in parts. By the time the repair station was completely cleaned out, it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. Although they had been busy all night, the two brothers were still full of energy. Finally, they used the bulldozer to demolish the tank repair station. Big Ivan drove Mason's van back to the city to find a way to transport the bulldozer away, while Mason, following the location he was given, drove the trailer full of treasures and quietly left Kursk. It was completely unrealistic to transport so many things back to the URI antique shop. It was even a huge problem to transport them back to Smolensk. After a brief discussion, the two brothers decided that Big Ivan would use his connections to urgently rent a huge warehouse in Ryol right next to Kursk. He transported the tank to its destination with a pounding heart. Big Ivan was already waiting there. The rented warehouse was large enough to park a Panther with plenty of room to spare. It was only then that the two had time to carefully examine the behemoth. There was no serial number, no insignia, not even anything inside the vehicle that could prove its identity or origin. Although its origin could not be determined, it didn't really matter. After all, it was a genuine Panther tank. After a thorough inspection, besides the second road wheel on the right side that needed to be replaced, the other parts of this Panther were in good condition. As long as the aging generator set was repaired, there was a high probability that it could be started again. A Panther and a Panther that can run are two different things. For the next month or so, the two brothers spent all their time in this warehouse. Mace uncleaned every detail of the tank inside and out. He removed rust where necessary and painted where necessary. Even the complex transmission mechanism, the Maybach engine, had been disassembled into parts all over the floor. The two were both busy. Mason was mainly responsible for the repairs. Big Ivan, with his extensive connections, was mainly responsible for finding channels to purchase replacement parts, and at the same time finding a buyer for this behemoth in advance. As for collecting it, the two brothers didn't even think about it. They were not yet qualified to collect this precious and rare tank. Since they couldn't collect it, the most realistic thing to do was to try to repair it and sell it for a good price. Repairing a tank was both difficult and easy, compared to modern cars full of electronic components. As long as you have the manual, if you can repair a tractor, you can basically repair a tank. Big Ivan had no shortage of manuals. These things were also considered military surplus and had always sold well. Big Ivan brought 2 large boxes of various tank repair manuals at once for reference. The difficulty lay in the weight. Not to mention the Maybach engine and the complex gearbox. A single-track link weighed dozens of cat ties. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be for Mason and another person to replace the tracks and road wheels of this tank. In the end, it was Big Ivan who found a used forklift to barely complete the transportation work. I'm exhausted. It's been a month and a half, but it's finally done. Mace uncollapsed onto the cold cement floor covered in oil and grease. Big Ivan was no better. With a clang, he dropped a large wrench at his feet and leaned against the track, not even wanting to speak. So, have you found a buyer yet? Mace asked after catching his breath. I found one a long time ago. And Ray, a wealthy man from Moscow, a VIP client of mine. Big Ivan wiped the sweat from his forehead and replied, so far away, are we going to transport it to him? Or YOL was not close to Moscow. Moreover, that was the capital of Russia. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to transport a Panther into the city without being noticed. From what Mesa knew, although Big Ivan had extensive connections, they were limited to the vicinity of Smolensk. Outside of this area, he was just as helpless. That's not a problem. The buyer is coming to see the goods in a couple of days. If he's satisfied, he'll be responsible for transporting it. That's good. Did you talk to him about the price? Big Ivan's answer relieved Mason. That's what I was about to tell you. The client is not very interested in a cash transaction. He prefers to barter. If it's a cash transaction, he can offer at most $500,000. Mason became anxious upon hearing this. Is he crazy? According transactions, an ordinary Stugit I can sell for 450,000 euros. Big Ivan pursed his lips. Don't look down on the price he's offering. It's already the highest among all the reliable buyers I could find. A clean $500,000 without having to pay a single kopeck in tax. What if we barter? Mace asked, unwilling to give up. He would definitely not sell for 500,000. While Big Ivan had been looking for a buyer these past few days, he hadn't been idle either. After much consultation, Mason finally learned that if this Panther could run, considering its rarity, its actual value was at least between $1 and $2 million. And this was already taking into account Russia's low prices. If it were auctioned in North America or Western Europe, this minimum price would have to be doubled. So my task, how much does a German Leopard to main battle tank cost? There's no comparison. One is a mass-minus produced standard piece of equipment, and the other has risen to the level of a collectible. Can a snuff bottle from the Qing Dynasty and a snuff bottle produced last month have the same price? A more direct example, when the movie Fury was being filmed a few years ago, there was only one operational Tiger tank in the whole world. The appearance fee for just a few shots was enough to buy some antique tanks with a large number of surviving examples. In the end, no matter how advanced the Leopard 2 was, at least the production line still existed. As long as you had the money and the power, you could produce as many as you wanted. But this Panther was different. It was fine if there were any of these minus production items that represented history. But once they became so scarce that there were only a handful of them, you couldn't buy them even if you had the money. Big Ivan had long expected that Mason would not be satisfied with this price. He took out his phone from the pocket of his greasy leather apron. You'll definitely be interested in this. If we barter, you can choose a car from his modification factory. To be honest, if it were me, I would definitely choose to barter. What do you mean? Big Ivan was hinting at something. He must have found something valuable from the other party. This guy's identity is very complicated. Besides having a private military museum, he is also the owner of a luxury car modification factory and one of the long-term sponsors of an Arctic exploration club. He is also a well-known energy tycoon in Moscow. Oh, he's also from my hometown. Big Ivan handed him the phone. I found this in the exchange list provided by Ray. He took the phone. On the screen was a military truck with a ferocious appearance. This is a brand new Tatra, -815P, all drive heavy duty 8x8 tactical truck produced by the Czech company Tatra. It's a high and product that the Czech 71st Mechanized Battalion has just been equipped with in recent years. The international market price is around $750,000. The black market price is probably upwards of $800,000. And Ray is willing to trade a camper chassis modified from it plus $100,000 for our treasure. Holy shit! This can be converted into a camper. How do you handle the paperwork? This is a big guy. Can it be driven on the road? Mason asked curiously. It wasn't unacceptable to trade for a camper. He knew he had no choice anyway. This wasn't China. After all, a 40-5- Panther tank was not some famous calligraphy, painting, or antique porcelain. The longer this Panther stayed in his hands, the greater the hidden danger. The most rational choice was to sell it as soon as possible before the hidden danger erupted and exchange it for real money. As for whether it was worth trading for a camper, he would know after he sold the camper in the future. Not noticing that Mason's mind was wandering, Big Ivan swiped the picture on the screen to the next one with his greasy finger. Only then did he answer. This vehicle was originally prepared by Andrei for his daughter. Before I approached him, the paperwork for this vehicle had already been resolved. So you don't have to worry, it's guaranteed to be legally roadworthy. You can even travel the world with it. Mason stared at the buyer's profile on his phone screen for a long time before saying, let's try to start it. If there are no problems, notify the buyer to come and see the goods. On the third weekend of December, on the outskirts of Wyowell, two large flatbed trailers drove into a farm next to the Oker River one after another. The buyer had sent an expert to see the restored Panther a week ago, which made the subsequent transaction negotiations much simpler. During the negotiation process, Big Ivan managed to get the Tatra off road truck he had his eye on with almost no effort. And today was the day of the transaction. As soon as the two trailers stopped, a Russian made Commander level bulletproof off-road vehicle, surrounded by several other off-road vehicles whose names he couldn't recall, drove into the farm. Good to see you again, Ivan. And Ray got out of the car and gave Big Ivan a bear hug first. This was the first time Mason had met Andrei. He was in his 50s, but he had a well-maintained figure and carried himself with the spirit of a soldier. Long time no see, Uncle Andrei. I didn't expect you to come in person. Big Ivan's big bare paws patted and raised back with a series of thuds. He didn't let go until the bodyguards next to him were about to draw their guns. Of course I had to come. I went to great lengths to persuade Natasha for this. And rubbed his numb shoulder and shook his head helplessly. He had no way of dealing with this big nephew of his. Hello, Mr. Andrei. Mason nodded slightly as a greeting. Lucky boy, hello? And Ray shook hands with Mason politely, but didn't pay too much attention. It was not uncommon for diggers to become rich overnight. Mason was not yet important enough for him to be overly enthusiastic. Alright, I'm in a hurry. I'm just stopping by to take a look. Let's complete the transaction quickly. Right away, right away. Big Ivan waved his hand and tossed the flatbed trailer's keys to the bodyguard next to Andrei. And Ray waved his hand. A bodyguard handed a small leather case to Mason, who was standing nearby. Everything's inside, and Ray pointed at the leather case in Mason's hand. But his eyes were fixed on the flatbed trailer not far away. He didn't relax until the expert who had come with him gave a thumbs up. This was great. With this operational Panther his museum finally had a treasure to show off. And Ray was in an excellent mood. He took out the cigars and tossed them to the two brothers. Ivan, I'm leaving now. Don't forget what I mentioned to you last time. Let me know as soon as possible. I'll give you a reply as soon as possible. Big Ivan patted his chest in assurance. He came and went like the wind. The entire transaction took less than 5 minutes. The flatbed trailer with the Panther left, leaving behind another trailer also covered with a canvas. After watching Ray leave the farm, Mace uneagerly opened the small leather case in his hand. Inside were N stacks of US dollars and a file folder. He casually took out 5 stacks of US dollars and tossed them to Big Ivan. This was agreed upon in advance. Besides this $50,000 commission, the half-track motorcycle in parts was also considered Big Ivan's commission. Special vehicle registration certificate, camper conversion permit, Dakar Rally rescue certificate, customs registration certificate, even the insurance policy is here. This is quite complete. This old man is quite considerate. Mason went through all the documents. The holder's name was written as his own.